Title: The Untold Story of the World's Greatest Prison Escapee. Before we begin, hit that subscribe button if you love stories that expose the darkest truths hidden behind the world's most dangerous criminals. Like the video, drop a comment, and buckle up, because this one will make you question everything you thought you knew about power, loyalty, and the price of freedom. The world remembers Puente Grande as a fortress, concrete walls thick enough to stop a missile, watchtowers stacked like chess pieces, and guards so heavily armed you'd think they were protecting a president instead of containing criminals. But what most people don't know is that one inmate inside would soon make this impenetrable prison look like a child's backyard fence. His name was Joaquin Guzman Lora, El Chapo, the mastermind behind the Sinaloa cartel, a man whose empire stretched across continents and whose reach extended into places no law, no army, no border could hold back. American agencies had been after him for decades. Mexican authorities bragged about catching him. Newspapers declared the war against him over. But what nobody understood was that Puente Grande wasn't his cage. It was his headquarters. Inside those steel doors, El Chapo lived better than most free men. Expensive liquor, gourmet meals, private visits that lasted days, and phones that rang non-stop as he issued orders to his organization. Guards didn't watch him, they served him. Officers didn't command him, they feared him. And the man who stood closest to him, the one who made all this possible, was Damiso Lopez, the deputy chief of security. A man who was supposedly trained to prevent escapes became El Chapo's greatest asset. After receiving gifts, luxury, money, and protection, Damiso didn't just work for El Chapo. He worshipped him. With Damiso at his side, El Chapo's life in prison became a strange blend of luxury and strategy. He wasn't only maintaining his empire, he was expanding it. His cartel developed a new method of transporting millions of dollars worth of drugs. Subterranean tunnels sophisticated enough to make military engineers pause. Ventilation, electricity, reinforced walls, the works. The U.S. border wasn't a barrier anymore, it was simply a guideline. And every month, those tunnels generated tens of millions of dollars, money that poured right back into the hands of the man sitting in a maximum security cell. But even empires built on influence have limits. And those limits were about to be tested. In early 2001, whispers began circulating through the prison. Mexico's Supreme Court was considering a new law that would allow notorious criminals, people exactly like El Chapo, to be extradited to the United States. A place he couldn't bribe. A place where his men couldn't reach him. A place where he would lose everything. For the first time in years, El Chapo felt something unfamiliar: vulnerability. He knew that if this law passed, his empire would fracture. The tunnels would fall under new control, and rival gangs would circle like vultures. And so, after 8 years of ruling from behind bars, he made the decision that would change criminal history forever. He would escape. But unlike the cinematic prison breaks people imagine, with gunfire, explosions, and chaos, El Chapo believed in something cleaner, quieter, and far more dangerous. A plan involving only a handful of people, each bought with a price no one could refuse. At the center of this plan was an unremarkable, easily overlooked prison employee, a laundry worker named Francisco Chito Camberos. He wasn't a guard. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't even someone who drew suspicion. He pushed carts. He moved clothes. Nobody ever questioned him. That made him perfect. El Chapo bribed him heavily. Damiso adjusted guard rotations. And together they selected a date, the 19th of January 2001. A day that would be remembered for decades. That morning the prison felt unusually calm. Less movement. Fewer guards in El Chapo's wing. No tension. No alarms. Everything looked normal. Chito rolled his cart toward El Chapo's cell, hands steady, face blank, as if he were simply collecting dirty uniforms like every other day. When he opened the cell, El Chapo stepped inside the cart, curling himself into the cramped space as piles of clothing were thrown over him. No one looked twice. But even the best plans bend under pressure. As Chito pushed the cart toward the gate, El Chapo felt the wheels shift. His weight caused the cart to roll backward, straight toward the wall. If it tipped, if a single sleeve of clothing slipped out of place, if anyone heard a thump, everything would end. Chito turned, saw the horror unfolding, and sprinted, catching the cart inches before disaster. He steadied it, smiled at the guard, asked him to open the gate. The guard did. And the world's most wanted drug lord rolled past him without a single heartbeat of suspicion. From there, the plan unfolded with surgical precision, straight toward the parking yard where a car waited, trunk open. El Chapo climbed in. The trunk slammed shut. The car drove to the exit gate. And nobody stopped the vehicle. Because the man driving it was a guard too, one already deep in El Chapo's pocket. At 8:52 p.m., Puente Grande's most notorious inmate was no longer inside Puente Grande. He was gone. And nobody knew it yet. Before we continue, make sure you're subscribed. Every chapter goes deeper, darker, and more unbelievable than the last. Hit that like button, drop a comment for the algorithm, and let's keep unraveling the truth behind the world's greatest escape. For the first hour after El Chapo's escape, Puente Grande prison moved with the same slow, rhythmic routine it always had. Dinner trays slid through bars. Guards patrolled lazily, half distracted. Radios crackled with unimportant chatter. No alarms. No shouts. No panic. Inside the laundry area, the van that carried the dirty prison clothes had already pulled away, its engine humming down the road. But what the guards didn't know was that this van had just transported Mexico's most powerful criminal through the gates of a prison considered unbreachable. The illusion of normalcy collapsed shortly after, when a cell check revealed what no officer ever expected to see: an empty cell where the king of Mexican crime once slept. Silence fell for a brief second. Then hell exploded. The guards sprinted. Orders were screamed. Radios went wild. Sirens tore into the night sky. But the chaos came too late. The van was already miles away, heading toward a remote road where a convoy of Sinaloa cartel soldiers waited in the dark with engines idling and guns ready. When Cheeto finally rolled to a stop, hands shaking, breath trembling, the back of the van opened, and the man who stepped out was not panicked, not sweating, not rattled in the slightest. El Chapo emerged calm, composed, almost amused. He knew this moment might define him for the next 20 years. And he embraced it. Within minutes, cartel operatives ushered him into an armored SUV reinforced with steel plates and bulletproof glass, one of 4 vehicles staged for rotation. They would switch cars 4 times in 4 different locations to erase any chance of tracking. Back at Puente Grande, meanwhile, investigators were desperately trying to understand how the impossible had happened. But the answer was painfully simple. Corruption was the most powerful weapon in the entire facility. Local police departments, prison guards, supervisors, and even government officials had all been touched, directly or indirectly, by the Sinaloa cartel's money. When federal authorities were finally notified, they reacted with speed the locals never mustered. Roadblocks, checkpoints, helicopters, and a manhunt that quickly became the biggest in modern Mexican history. But the truth was humiliating. By the time federal officers arrived at the prison gates, the man they were looking for was already flying above them. A helicopter, its pilot paid more than his annual salary just to keep his mouth shut, waited at a safe spot deep in the countryside. As the armored SUV convoy arrived, El Chapo stepped out, still wearing part of the uniform he had escaped in. He climbed into the helicopter with ease, as if boarding a private jet instead of fleeing the law. The helicopter lifted off, blades slicing the night. It headed toward a mountainous region peppered with cartel safe houses. But El Chapo didn't stay in one place long. Within hours, he switched vehicles again, eventually ending up inside a heavily guarded safe house on the outskirts of Mexico City. And that's where reality finally caught up. As El Chapo's convoy cruised through the capital, the unmistakable sound of sirens grew closer. When he pressed his face to the tinted window, he saw something that made his blood run cold. Police cars. Dozens of them. Lights flashing. Engines roaring. They surrounded the streets ahead and behind. Motorcycles flanked the vehicles. Officers appeared on rooftops. For the first time since the prison break, El Chapo felt the rising pressure of fear. "They found us," he muttered. "How did they find us? Who gave us up?" He turned toward the driver. "Don't lie to me. How are they here?" But the driver didn't panic. He smirked. "They're not here to arrest you," he said. "They're here to protect you." El Chapo blinked in disbelief. And then it made sense. All the police vehicles around him, every single one, belonged to departments that were already in the cartel's pocket. They weren't hunting him. They were escorting him, forming a shield around the most wanted man in the Western Hemisphere. To the public, it would look like the most intense police chase ever. In reality, it was a guard of honor. No federal agents could break through. No rival gangs could intercept him. No citizen would dare question a convoy of police sirens blazing through the capital at midnight. When the escort finally reached a safe house buried deep within a neighborhood controlled by the Sinaloa cartel, El Chapo stepped out and stared at the army of corrupt officers who had just protected him. He didn't just escape prison. He didn't just outrun the federal police. He proved, once and for all, that his influence was so vast it stretched into the very institutions created to stop him. News of the escape broke worldwide within hours. Reporters called it the greatest prison escape in modern history. U.S. officials expressed outrage. Mexican authorities tried to downplay it. But on the streets, in whispered conversations, dark bars and border towns, El Chapo wasn't criticized. He was mythologized. And as he stood on the balcony of his hideout, looking out over the glowing chaos below, he wasn't thinking about fear or capture or consequences. He was thinking about expansion. He had been caged for 8 years. Now he had 14 years of freedom ahead of him. 14 years to build something unstoppable. 14 years to turn Mexico into his battlefield. The legend had only just begun. Before we dive into the final chapter, hit that subscribe button. Stories like this take hours to unravel, and you don't want to miss the next one. Like, comment, and let's finish this. When El Chapo settled into his new life as a fugitive, he didn't hide in fear. He expanded with fury. His escape from Puente Grande wasn't just a jailbreak. It was a declaration of war against every rival cartel, every government agency, and every force that dared to challenge him. Overnight, his myth doubled in size. He became a phantom. A ghost king ruling from the shadows. A man who could slip through concrete, steel, and government walls as if they were made of paper. But beneath the legend was a truth few people knew. For El Chapo, freedom was never peaceful. It was fueled by paranoia. He slept in a different house every few nights. His safe houses were hidden in mountains so remote they required ATVs and horses to reach. In every room he installed escape tunnels, some leading into rivers, others into abandoned mines, and some stretching for miles beneath the earth. His men were under strict orders. Never say his name out loud. Never carry a phone near him. Never stay in one location for too long. Because one mistake, one slip, could erase everything. Yet even with this paranoia, El Chapo's empire grew beyond anything Mexico had ever seen. The Sinaloa cartel controlled entire cities. Local police forces answered to them first, government second. Judges were paid. Politicians were pressured. Mayors were either replaced or convinced. Cocaine, meth, heroin, fentanyl, shipments didn't just trickle into the U.S. They surged like a wave. Billions flowed in. Enough money to buy loyalty, silence, weapons, planes, tunnels, entire neighborhoods. And for years it seemed like no one could touch him. But while El Chapo felt untouchable, the U.S. government saw something different, a growing threat that was destabilizing two countries. For the first time, American agencies weren't just watching. They were hunting. It started with intelligence shared between the DEA, Homeland Security, and Mexican Marines, the one branch of Mexican forces least affected by cartel corruption. These Marines, highly trained and heavily coordinated with U.S. agencies, became the backbone of a new mission: capture El Chapo at any cost. 4 months they studied patterns, sightings, intercepted messages, satellite images, and whispers from rival cartels desperate to survive. Slowly, the U.S. began piecing together the only pattern in El Chapo's life that remained consistent: his obsession with tunnels. Every house had one. Every ranch had two. Some were simple. Some were constructed with ventilation systems, lighting, and rail tracks. The most advanced tunnels even connected to distant towns, allowing him to move between locations without stepping into daylight. This obsession soon became his greatest strength, and his greatest weakness. One night, after tracking calls made by a lieutenant in his inner circle, Mexican Marines raided a safe house in Sinaloa. It was filled with weapons, money, and high-ranking cartel members. But El Chapo wasn't there. What they did find, however, was even more valuable. A tunnel, new, reinforced, and leading directly under the mountains. The Marines knew instantly, this was fresh. Very fresh. Which meant El Chapo had been there, or still was. A chase began underground. 4 hours the Marines crawled through the narrow tunnel, sweating in the heat, crawling through dirt and debris. But the tunnel branched into multiple directions, leading to farms, drainage systems, abandoned buildings. He vanished through the maze he created. El Chapo had escaped again. But this close call shook something in him. Rumors spread among his inner circle. He wasn't sleeping. He wasn't eating. He paced rooms until sunrise. He questioned everyone, even longtime loyalists. His paranoia grew bleeding edges. Every sound outside became a threat. Every animal movement in the mountains felt like surveillance. He forced his men to double security, then triple it. He stopped visiting his wives and children. He rarely saw sunlight. Then something happened that his enemies never expected. He got careless. In early 2014, still running his empire, He grew comfortable with one particular hideout on the edge of Mazatlan, a high-rise condo overlooking the ocean. It was beautiful, quiet, secluded. For the first time in years he allowed himself routine. He stayed too long. The DA intercepted a message between two of his men. Nothing dramatic, nothing obvious. But it confirmed one thing. El Jefe is upstairs. Before dawn, Mexican Marines surrounded the building. This time there was no tunnel, no convoy of corrupt officers, no helicopter waiting in the mountains. Just walls. Blast. And a man who had run out of places to hide. The Marines stormed the building floor by floor. As they approached the top level, El Chapo grabbed a rifle and attempted to run to the underground garage. But the exit was sealed. Armed Marines blocked every escape route. For the first time since Puente Grande, he felt the weight of inevitability. When the Marines burst into the room they found him cornered. Still armed, still furious, but outnumbered 10-1. And just like that, the world's greatest escape artist stopped running. El Chapo is in custody, Mexican officials announced. The news shook the world. The man who once bribed prisons, outran federal forces, and turned cities into battlegrounds was now sitting in handcuffs. But the legend didn't end there. 2 years later he would attempt one last escape. One last tunnel. One last chance at freedom. And though he escaped again briefly, his luck finally ran out. In 2017 El Chapo was extradited to the United States, the fate he feared most. There are no tunnels in ADX Florence. No corrupt guards. No secret doors. No mountains. Just concrete, steel, and silence. For the first time in his life there was truly no way out.